Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. A lot of you have been waiting to see this video on this new palette, and I'm sorry, it is my fault because I procrastinated picking this palette up. I ordered it. I think I ordered this like 2 days ago on the NATASHA DENONA website. I finally got it today, so now I'm able to sit down and play with this palette. So yeah, let's dive into it. We are literally jumping right in. I don't want to waste any time. This is the new NATASHA DENONA I Need a Nude palette. This retails for $69. This is her midi palette. This packaging is gorgeous. I was very surprised to see that this packaging is raised. It's not like flat like her regular midis. I like the change of this, and I also like how modern and sleek this packaging looks. And of course, you can pop out these shadows and move them around if you like. And here's what the packaging looks like, as well as all of the shade names and the finishes and the ingredients if you want to pause to read. This is the color story of the palette. I know the big question that a lot of you are wondering is this going to work on deeper complexion? So I'm here to test this palette out and see. This new palette from NATASHA features a new formula. It is her Chroma Crystal eyeshadows. So this new formula is supposed to look wet on the eyes. I'm excited to dive into the swatches of this and see how this looks with the swatches. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some live swatches of this palette before we dive into the eye look. So we have Stone, Whisper, Ella, we have Vague, Travertine, not sure if I'm saying that right. And then we have that new sparkle formula, which is so beautiful. This one is called Delilah, and it looks wet. That is such a beautiful shade. I love that shift in there. Next, we have the shade Silhouette, Muse, which is that foiled shade. Wow, that is beautiful. Fair. And then we have Filigree. Next, we have the shade Wit, Sheen, which is another one of that new wet formula, Tender. And then the last shade that we have is the new wet formula called Mia, which is really beautiful. So here are the swatches. Honestly, these shimmers look absolutely beautiful. Tasha kills it with her shimmers. It's the mattes are a little bit questionable with how they look, because on my arm they low-key all look the same. But let's get these on the eye. You've seen the swatches, let's get into an eye look. My hair is wet. I've been trying to dry it, but it is not drying. It never dries when I put it in a ponytail and I wet it. To start off, I'm gonna prime with my Too Faced Shadow Insurance Primer. Really indecisive on what look I wanted to do, so I decided to just do one look because I have some other videos I need to film after this, and I didn't want to have two different eye looks. I'm gonna try to use as many shades as possible. I'm also gonna post some YouTube shorts using this palette, doing different eye looks as well, in case you want to check those out. Let's start off with this shade right here. I know a lot of you were skeptical about this palette, and honestly with this one I am pretty skeptical because it is cool toned as well, and I know sometimes cool tones can kind of transfer a little bit more ashy on the eye. I am building up this shade. It's definitely not showing up like I thought it would. It's more of like a dusting type of color. So far we are not starting off good. Thought about taking the shade Wit first, but I felt like this one was a little bit more deeper. And right now it's not showing up like I would like. But a part of me feels like I should go in with the MAC Paint Pot for this palette, which, you know what? I am going to do that. So I just went in with my MAC Paint Pot in the shade Land Low. Now let's try that shade again. I feel like I might have to treat this like pastels right here. And we're gonna start this up in the crease. This lighter base doesn't work like I want it to, then I don't know. But I'm just taking this all through the crease. Not liking that shade. Let's take a little bit of this shade called Wit right here and see what this shade adds in the crease. I feel like this shade is even lighter than that first shade that we put down. I feel like these shades just look more pastel and they're not really translating very well on camera. So I'm not feeling it. Like all of these mattes that are in this palette are very, very light. And I feel like we could have used some deeper cool tones because I'm already going in with multiple layers just to build this up, and I'm not really getting much from it. I know that this shade Silhouette is going to work great because it is deep, but as far as like a transition-y kind of shade, there really is none in this palette. Let's take a little bit of this shade Silhouette, which is literally the deepest matte in this palette. It definitely does show up. I knew the shade was going to show up, but that just sucks that that is the deepest matte. But I feel like we could have used at least 2 more deeper mattes or even more of a mid-tone. There should have been more shades for deeper complexions. I don't know, I feel like so far I've gotten better luck with the Yucca palette. All right, so this is how much I was able to build up that Silhouette shade. So far, it seems like the only matte that actually shows up on my skin tone is the shade Silhouette, but even that, this is as much as I was able to build it up. I mean, I can go on with more layers, but it can only get so deep. I also feel like this shade's a little patchy as well. Hopefully the shimmers will help this look to work. There's some really pretty shimmers in here. We have the like newer wet formula, which feels very wet to the touch. Those are beautiful. Like the shimmers in NATASHA Denona's palettes never disappoint. There are a lot of deep tone shimmers in here, but I honestly feel like I'd rather there be that energy that the deep tone shimmers have into the mattes. You know, I'd rather there be more mattes than shimmers, and I'd rather us have a lot more variation when it comes to the mattes. Like the mattes are lacking in depth, and I feel like there's not much you can do with this palette if you have a more like medium to deep to dark skin tone. I do want to try this shade called Muse. This is really pretty and super wet. So let's try Muse on the lid. Wow, that is so pretty. That's a really pretty shimmer. Like that's gorgeous. I'm just, you know, tapping this on to the lid. Try Delilah. That is really pretty. I feel like on the eye, you can't really see too much of a difference, but that shade is gorgeous. I'm gonna take a little bit of this shade called Sheen right here, and I'm gonna place this in the inner corner. That's pretty. Okay, yeah, that is pretty. That one is more of like a toppery kind of shade. I like the shimmers, and you can also see like that kind of like wet effect that the inner corner has. That's pretty. Like that is gorgeous. Let's try a little bit of this shimmer right here in the more like outer corner, just to give it a little bit more depth. I don't know. At this point, it's looking like shimmer barf on my eyes, but hey, I just wanted to try as many shades as I possibly could. Yeah, that definitely does add a little bit. You can kind of see it there, but overall, all the shimmers on my eyes low-key look very similar. Love NATASHA's shimmers, but I want to be able to use the entire palette on my eyes. Like, so far, this palette is definitely my least favorite from NATASHA. Honestly, I thought that even with a lighter base, this would show up a little bit more on my skin tone, but after having the palette and trying out these mattes, I'm feeling like they're just not it. So my makeup is basically done, and I thought we would do the lower lash line together. I'm not gonna do too much to the lower lash line. I'm gonna take this shade Silhouette, and I'm basically just going to tie this back into the look just to kind of smoke out the lower lash line. Makeup look is done. Love the overall makeup look today, but let's get into a little bit of a comparison. Now, someone requested that I compare this new palette to the Beauty Bay Neutral palette, so that's what I'm gonna do. I don't own the Glam palette because I'm not really a cool tone lover. This one wasn't as cool toned as the Glam, but now I'm kind of thinking, will the Glam work better for me? I really like the overall finished look that I created with this new palette, but of course I have some thoughts I do want to get into. Let me show you how this looks with the Beauty Bay Neutral palette, which is one of my favorite palettes from Beauty Bay. You have so much variety in this palette. You get a lot of shades in here for like, what is it, maybe $35? I love Beauty Bay. I will always recommend Beauty Bay 100%. Here is a little bit of a comparison. I feel like I probably could dupe this palette. I'm also gonna put a picture up on the screen as well so you can see it, you know, fully. But of course, in the NATASHA DENONA palette, you are getting those, you know, really like those wet type of shades and those foiled kind of shades as well. But in the Beauty Bay palette, you're not getting that. But Beauty Bay has some really beautiful shimmers. I tell you guys this all the time. I love Beauty Bay. They have some like really metallic formulas. They also have like your generic, you know, shimmers. The mattes are blendable. I feel like this definitely is a formula that can be compared to high end. I love Beauty Bay. I feel like if you don't want to spend $69 on this palette, definitely should check this one out because hello, look at all of the shades you get. Look at the variation that you get. You can get so many different shades with this. This is a cool tone palette, but you just have so much to choose from, which is why I love this one. And I definitely would recommend this one over the NATASHA DENONA I Need a Nude palette. Now let me get into my thoughts on this palette. As some of you guys were probably skeptical about if this palette is going to work on you, so was I, but I still wanted to get it to try it out for you. Now that I have it, I don't recommend this palette if you have a deep to deep dark complexion because I feel like you have to use a super light base to get these shades to show up. And even when I did that, it still didn't show up like I thought it would. I'm not even gonna say that I'm disappointed in this palette because this palette is very beautiful. The shimmers in this palette definitely are the star, but for $69 and from a makeup artist, I would expect a little bit more. We already have the Glam palette, which is a cool tone palette. That palette does lean a lot more like silvery cool toned, and this one's more, of course, neutral cool toned. But I feel like with this palette, not a lot of people can get a lot of use out of this. Even when I use the deepest matte in this palette, this is the depth level that I got, and I feel like this is not deep enough. There should have been an even deeper kind of matte. We could have gotten rid of one of these two like salmon-y kind of shades, and even these two mattes right there. This palette is a little bit of a missed opportunity to have deeper mattes in here. I feel like the slightest change of changing out two of the mattes in this palette would have been better. I didn't use the shade Stone, Mesh, or Tender. I didn't use these three, even on the finger. Why would I even bother? This would show up so ashy on me. So I'm like, I didn't even bother with those. I did take this shade Fair off camera, which makes a really nice brow bone highlight. Those other cool tone matte shades are just... no. This palette is also kind of the reason why I tend to stay away from, you know, cool tones because sometimes they tend to look ashy. But looking at this Beauty Bay neutral palette, we definitely could have gotten deeper cool tone shades. The shimmers in this palette are beautiful. I really do like this wet formula. On the eyes, I do feel like some of those shimmers do look very similar. I do appreciate that there are deeper toned shimmers in this palette, but I feel like these two shades could have been deeper mattes, you know? I prefer there to be more variation with the mattes than the shimmers. And I feel like NATASHA has been doing that a lot lately. She's been giving us more shimmers and there's a lot of variation across all of the shimmers. But when it comes to the mattes, I feel like it's in this one tone family. We're kind of leaving out some other skin tones. In the promo pictures, I saw that those looks went really deep, but I built up this silhouette shade so much, and this is the depth level I got. So I'm not really seeing how they got that deep of a shade on their eyes. The other palette that NATASHA released this year is the Yucca palette, and to be honest, I prefer the Yucca palette. Majority of the shades in this palette are different. A lot of these shades look very, very similar. That's my thoughts on the new NATASHA DENONA I Need a Nude palette. This palette is sold out right now on Sephora. I feel like a lot of people are loving this palette. A lot of people have been anticipating this palette, and I get it. I definitely get it, especially if you love cool tones. Definitely for me, I feel like this is my least favorite color story from NATASHA, even though at first glance this palette is absolutely beautiful, but I can only do so much with this palette. I would definitely have to reach into other palettes for deeper mattes to be able to use this palette, and I don't think that that's worth it, to be honest. Hope this video was helpful for those of you who wanted to see my thoughts on this palette, and I'll definitely catch you guys in my next one. Bye guys.